confidence is not the prerequisite, it's the result. So I would encourage you to play a mini detective and look for ways where you can speak in situations where you might not. Start speaking before certainty arrives.
Welcome to Redesigning Health and Home. I'm Meg.
And I'm Carrie. We love creating beautiful, functional spaces and living healthy, vibrant lives. So join us as we chat about simple, practical ways to take care of your body, mind, and your home. Whether it's fitness tips, home decor ideas, or navigating those big life moments, we're here to share what works for us and what doesn't, with some encouragement along the way.
Let's redesign this life together, one step, one room, and one habit at a time.
Hey, Redesigning Health and Home family, it's Carrie. Meg is cheering us on behind the scenes. Today's guest is talking about a topic that I think is relevant to absolutely everyone. Guest today is Melissa Entzminger. She is a communication strategist and the founder of Confidence Spark, a neuroscience-informed app built for the exact moment before you walk into something important. Whether it's an interview, a pitch, a presentation, or even a hard conversation, Confidence Spark helps professionals regulate their nerves and perform with clarity under pressure. After 6 years of coaching executives, entrepreneurs, and leaders, Melissa saw the same pattern: smart, capable professionals losing influence, not because they lacked skill, but because pressure showed up in their body at the exact wrong moment. So Confidence Spark gives users guided mental reps and quick resets so they don't just hope that they'll feel confident. They know what to do when pressure shows up. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. And how are things with you today?
Well, thank you so much for having me. They are wonderful. I'm so excited to be here.
You have a lot of really interesting things to share with us today. And I just want to step back for a moment and ask you, if our listeners really applied what they learned from you today, how might their lives change?
Well, I think the biggest shift is that people would stop waiting to feel confident before they would start speaking and understand that confidence is something that you build through speaking. So many people feel that they are sitting in meetings and they're having conversations and opportunities, and they have these thoughts that they just don't share. Not because they don't care, but because they're evaluating themselves in real time. And that internal evaluation is just exhausting.
Mm.
But if listeners evaluate and apply what we are going to talk about today, they're going to start contributing sooner. That overthinking is going to lessen, and they're just going to have this greater sense of alignment between how they want to show up and how they actually show up. Confidence isn't about being louder, it's becoming less hesitant. And when that hesitation decreases, then your presence increases.
Wow, you packed a lot into that already. So I'm very excited to dive into all of those things that you said. So Melissa, take us back to how your journey into public speaking began.
So when I first started public speaking, I was in high school and I thought I wanted to be an attorney, and a family friend said, if you want to be a good attorney, you should be good at public speaking. Consider joining this competitive speech and debate team. And so I hated giving speeches. I wasn't very confident at it, but I was determined to be a good attorney. And the beautiful thing about joining the debate team was that it gave me structure. And so by joining it, I wasn't the loudest person in the room. I wasn't the most charismatic. But what it did was it gave me a way to organize my thoughts. And that was key. So I learned how to build an idea, how to support it, and then how to respond when I was challenged. And so what was happening was subtle, but it was really powerful. I didn't feel confident because I believed in myself more. I felt confident because I trusted my thinking. So we were taught that no matter what question or argument came up, you could always fall back on these three things: make your point, explain why it matters, and then just give one example. Very simple. So there was one round in particular that comes to mind, and I completely lost my train of thinking. And I was mid argument, and I remember feeling that wave of panic. And it seemed like everything was just going to fall apart. And instead of trying to remember my exact wording, I went back to the structure. So I paused, I took a deep breath, and I thought, what was my main point? Why does it matter? What is one example? And that simple reset helped me to keep going. The round did collapse. I didn't sound perfect, but I stayed present. I was clear. I was able to keep going with what I wanted to say. And in that moment, I realized that confidence isn't really about having the perfect sentence. It's about having a place to come back to when your mind gets noisy. And that same structure works beautifully in meetings, in podcasting, in presentations, in everyday conversations. So when you don't know what to say, just come back to simplifying the point, why it matters, and give an example.
Wow, that's an excellent framework that I feel anyone can use. And not just in public speaking, even just having communication with anyone that you work with or anyone in your life. So, going back to that 3-step framework, I could imagine that being very useful. So, when people say that they're terrified of public speaking, what do you think they're really afraid of?
I would say that they're actually being afraid of being judged or evaluated in real time.
Yeah.
So they don't want to look incompetent or disappoint expectations or lose credibility. And so what your brain does is it interprets these social risks as real risks. And so your reaction isn't irrational, it's your brain trying to protect you. I
Mm,
had a client say to me once that it's not that I don't know what to say, it's just that I'm afraid that I'll say it in a way that makes me sound stupid. And
mm,
I think that's a fear that a lot of people have. And what struck me was that she was really capable, she was respected, she was doing great in her career. And
uh-huh,
so the fear wasn't having the ideas, it was how she was presenting them. And so, what I like to tell clients is that the goal isn't to try to sound impressive, it's to be useful.
uh-huh.
Because the moment that you try to focus on impressing people, then your attention is leaving the conversation and it goes to monitoring yourself. How do I sound? Am I smart enough? Are they thinking of me? And you're essentially giving away your power, right? And that internal monitoring is just exhausting. And it
Yeah.
kind of disconnects you from the conversation and from the room. But when you focus on being useful and how can I contribute to the conversation and what do they need, then you're focusing on the other person. You're listening better, you're thinking more clearly, and you're contributing instead of performing. And that shift is how you give your power back because your value is no longer dependent on approval. It's anchored in that contribution.
Mm. You remind me of a time, and you and I have actually discussed this off camera. I was preparing to give a presentation to a group of people. I'm a home stylist, and I was going to present the services that I provide and how I could help people. And I prepared ahead of time, and I was actually quite excited leading up to the presentation. And it got close to my time to go up to the microphone. And I did. I had that panic of, oh my gosh, are they going to think I'm pushy, that I'm trying to get their money, that I'm just being salesy and that's kind of icky. But if I had have come back to thinking of it from the perspective of how can I serve? How can I help? How can I offer my gifts to help people? I think it would have gone very differently. I totally panicked and I didn't even go up to the microphone. Complete missed opportunity. My husband was like, "Oh my gosh, you didn't get up and say your thing." And I was like, I can't. And it really was just such a moment of panic. And, I had regret afterwards because it was a missed opportunity for sure.
Well, going forward, I would love for all of your listeners to think of when they go into those moments, picture a big stop sign when you start to have those mental spirals of, are they going to judge me or are they going to think I'm too salesy? And just think, how can I be of service? And by focusing on the other person, you don't know that maybe they desperately needed your services and they really wanted someone to help you because they're really bad at it. And so you could have been giving them that glass of water when they were in the desert. And so by thinking, how can I be of service, that helps reframe the situation.
Yes, I needed a mini Melissa sitting on my shoulder during that time.
When I shrug myself, right?
Yeah. Yes. So, how do you define confidence, especially if someone is feeling nervous?
So it's not the absence of nerves, and it's not even walking into a room feeling calm and steady. It's actually self-trust. It's your willingness to stay present, even if those thoughts get busy or your heart is racing, and maybe a small part of you is wondering how you'll be received. So there's a lot of people who say, I don't feel confident. And that's actually a misnomer. I can understand why people say that, but confidence is something that is a skill that we can build. And we build that through doing reps. Just like when we are building up muscles, we're often wobbly and we're sore at first, and it doesn't always feel good. If we do reps and put ourselves in situations to help us feel more confident, it helps build up that skill. And so self-efficacy research shows that confidence comes from mastering experience and moments where you did act. Maybe you struggled a little bit, but you realized that you could handle it. And so confidence is built from doing something and then surviving through it. So even now to this day, there's certain rooms that I walk in or meetings that I go through, and I have those thoughts of, I hope this lands. I hope that I say this clearly. I was in a meeting recently, and outside of the room as I entered, I thought, well, I hope I do this well. And then I thought, I don't have to be impressive. I just have to be helpful. And that small shift is really powerful. Nothing magical happened. The nerves didn't disappear, but it helped me to stay present and to feel calmer by focusing on the other person and that situation. And so confidence is built through doing those reps. So what do those reps look like? Well, the first rep is speaking before you're fully ready, not with a reckless sentence or a half-formed thought, but it's just saying the idea, asking the question. You don't have to have a perfectly packaged sentence to start talking. If you don't, sometimes when you're in those meetings, other people say those sentences. And so just ask the question. It trains your nervous system that action is safe, even if it isn't complete. The second rep that you can try is to stay after you do an imperfect act instead of withdrawing. So let's say that we maybe feel like we have an awkward pause. And I want to clarify that the only time a pause is awkward is if you make it awkward. Confident people pause all the time. And those pauses are really powerful. They give your audience time to absorb what you're saying and to process what you've just said. The only time that a pause is awkward is if you look like you forgot what you were going to say. And so if you make what you think is a mistake, the only way your audience is going to know that is a mistake is if you draw attention to it. Otherwise, they're just going to assume that that's what you meant to say. And so if you pause and you don't abandon yourself because something felt awkward, this trains recovery, and recovery is where that self-trust comes in. And so the third rep that I encourage is that you are noticing survival, not just discomfort. So your brain naturally records what feels uncomfortable and ignores what felt fine. We want to try to log evidence in the what we did well category. And so I spoke and the conversation continued. That could be a great example. Another example was I didn't say it perfectly, but I was still respected. Or it could be my voice shook and nothing terrible happened. I still stayed standing. We know that confidence is built from remembering safety and not performing perfectly. Often in our Instagram worthy situations, lives that we live, people actually want us to be more authentic. And we trust people faster when they aren't giving us perfectly authentic information. And so you don't have to be completely flawless to be confident and to look confident. It's that quiet trust that you get from moments where you stayed present and you focused anyway.
Right. Yeah, especially in this day of AI where you get suspicious. Like that was a little too perfect. Was that AI? We've been saying that so much in our household. I don't know. That seemed a little too perfect. And so I do agree that showing up authentically is a relief to people and you feel more human and they feel more connected. So I think what you're telling me is you can be nervous and confident at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Most confident communicators are actually. Nerves are that activation, and then confidence gives you direction. So your body is preparing for attention, and it doesn't mean that anything is wrong. It just means that something matters. The problem is when there's too many nerves, right? And it becomes debilitating. And so having a structure to follow and having some deep breathing and knowing how to control those nerves, all of those things are important. We know that stress research shows that we don't respond to events themselves, we interpret what's at stake. And so that shift happens when people stop interpreting nerves as danger and they start interpreting them as readiness. So, our goal isn't to eliminate nerves, it's to learn how to move forward while still being present with them. So, people understand that it's important to fix the the pressure and to learn how to move through that pressure and to focus on calming down and being able to stay focused in the conversation or the meeting or wherever they have to present.
You show up and it's getting close to time and you've prepared and you are ready to go back to your what is my main point? Why does it matter? And how do I deliver it? But your nerves are really high. What is one thing that someone who's about to speak and is really feeling those nerves at the gut level, what is something that they could do to maybe help calm that a little?
Well, one of the fastest ways that you can help calm those nerves is to move from self evaluation to service. So instead of thinking, how do I sound or how do I look or I hope this lands or this person is giving me the stink eye, instead, we want to think, what does this room need from me? And that shift immediately reduces the pressure because instead of focusing on yourself, you're focusing on others. And so I'm going to let your audience in on a secret because I like them. So, a technique that I like to tell clients is right before you go on stage, do a breathing exercise. And when I first tell some clients about it, they're kind of like, well, I've been breathing my whole life. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So, yes, but this breathing technique is one that the Army uses, surgeons use, and it's really powerful as it calms your parasympathetic nervous system. So, our nervous system is like a light switch, it's either on or off. And so, this is going to calm our parasympathetic nervous system, helping us feel calmer. And so, when we feel calmer, we're going to do a better job having that difficult conversation or giving a podcast or whatever that might be. So, you inhale for the count of 4, you hold it for the count of 2, and you exhale for the count of 6. And you do that at least 4 times. And the trick is the exhale has to be longer than the inhale. So that's the key that makes it calming for your parasympathetic nervous system. And the beautiful thing is if you're at some event and you're waiting to get called up or something like that, it's invisible because it's breathing. And so nobody knows that you're doing it and you can help yourself feel calmer before you go on stage. I was at a workshop and I was teaching this to a group of people and one lady was about to get up and share, and she was like, I just tried your breathing technique, and oh my goodness, it totally worked.
And you're like, yay, of course it did.
Yeah, it was very funny.
That's great. And I have heard various, slightly different about holding it for 7 and out for 8, but I have tried it myself when I'm feeling a little bit on the anxious side, and it really does. I don't know how it can't help, honestly, because if nothing else, it's forcing you to pay attention and do the counting, right? Your mind can't go all the other directions because you're focusing in on the counting and in on yourself, and really letting that breath kind of help wash out some of the nerves for sure. Yeah, I like that. What role does preparation play in confidence? Is it that you need to memorize all of your speech ahead of time? What is the preparation process? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I encourage clients to not memorize things word for word, but to have more organized thinking.
Mhm.
So memorization can actually increase anxiety because if you lose your place, then sometimes your brain doesn't know how to get back on track to where you were. But if
Right.
you remember the structure, then you just know, okay, here's where I was at in the structure. And then you're able to return, and your wording sounds more conversational, and you're able to stay more present in whatever you're presenting. You're able to have more flexibility. I
Mhm.
had a client who initially came to me, and she liked to memorize things word for word and was coming up in a big board meeting. And the problem was that she would get nervous and then would blank out and lose her place and have the oh no face. And then everybody knew that she had forgotten where she was and couldn't get back on track. And so, what we did when we worked together was we decided that we would try a different approach and put some bullet points in, and she would be able to use her own thoughts and ideas. And so there was a structure in place and some keywords and ideas that she was going to be able to put in her own sentences as she was speaking. And so ideally, the structure we used was the point, what was the why, and then give an example. And
Okay.
that structure can be used in a variety of different formats. What's your point? What's the why of why you're giving it? And then give an example. And the next time that board meeting came around, she was more relaxed. She didn't lose her place, and she felt like she was thinking out loud versus performing. And at the end of the day, confidence comes from being able to trust your ideas and know that even if you lose your place, you'll be able to find that footing and
Sure.
remember those sentences. And so I think that's a much more effective approach than just straight up memorizing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so would somebody write those bullet points down on a little paper that they could just scan? Is that what your suggestion is? Or are the bullet points what you're memorizing and then you're building off of that?
Ideally, you'll have a piece of paper, and then if you don't need to look at the piece of paper, that's fine. But if you do, then it's there. And so that way you're kind of covered either way.
Hmm. What should you do if you have that freeze moment?
Well, freezing is an interesting concept because that goes back to our prehistoric days. And so for most of our human history, when we belonged to a group, that was a good thing because that meant survival, right? It's much easier to kill a buffalo if you're in a group than if you are by yourself. And so our nervous system has evolved to treat social evolution as something significant, right? And so when you are presenting or you are speaking in a meeting, you are essentially isolating yourself from that group. And so that's why when we have those moments when we are being watched or judged or evaluated, like speaking or presenting, it triggers that same fight or flight or freeze response. And so freezing isn't your brain malfunctioning, it's your brain trying to protect you from that perceived social risk. And so the challenge here isn't that the modern consequence is usually discomfort. It's that the nervous system is still reacting as if the stakes are much higher. And so your brain, when it goes blank, it's not really a confidence failure. It's just that your working memory is disrupted. So we know that research on performance pressure shows that anxiety is competing for the same mental resource that you need for thinking clearly. And so it's not that your brain forgot, it's just that it got crowded. And that moment where your thoughts can feel temporarily inaccessible. So recovery isn't speed, it's presence. So what our instinct is we freeze and we naturally just want to plow past that moment, right? Pretend it didn't happen. But that is actually the opposite of what we should do because that actually increases the pressure. And so that actually makes the situation worse. So instead, we want to pause, take one slow breath, take the exhale longer than the inhale, right? Because we know that that's going to calm our parasympathetic nervous system. And then we're going to restate our thought in the simplest way. Or if we're getting asked a question, maybe we can say, could you restate that question? That buys us a little bit of time to get our thinking back online. And so what often looks like a breakdown internally, externally just looks like thoughtfulness. So what looks maybe like panic to us internally, like our audience is not connected to our nerve endings. They don't know how we're feeling or if our stomach is in knots or the butterflies are not flying in formation. So that is the good news. And so if you just pause and give yourself a moment to come back online, have that exhale be longer than the inhale, it just looks like you are being a confident, calm communicator. And especially when your next words come out with gusto and with some emphasis, it looks like that was an intentional pause.
So we just talked about somebody who's presenting and they freeze. On the other extreme are people who present and maybe come across as like a little full of themselves or maybe like they're bragging. What's your recommendation in avoiding that opposite side of the spectrum?
So, the unique thing about sharing your experience is there's two parts to sharing your experience. There is sharing your experience, and then the second half is explaining how that experience is going to benefit the other person. So, this is especially important in interviews, or we're ramping up into our political season. So, we hear a lot of political speeches and people talking about all about their experience. And so sadly, we hear a lot of speeches about, I've done XYZ things, and that's where the conversation ends. And so we as audiences, as human nature, we all want to know, how is what you're saying going to serve us? And so it's really important for you, if you're going to share your experience, to do two parts. One, give your experience, and then two, explain how that experience is going to benefit me. So I worked with a political client recently, and she had an incredible background of service and leadership, but she was very hesitant to talk about it because she had watched other political candidates and they had sounded like they were bragging. And to her, raised from a very humble beginning, it just sounded like nails on a chalkboard. And the problem is, people need to know your context. They want to know who you are, what you stand for in order to get your vote. And so it's really important to give your experience, but it's also important to understand then how you're going to use that to shape policy and how you're going to use that to better their life as voters. And so we use a really simple framework. And instead of just saying what she did and moving on, We began by connecting her experiences and how that was shaping her perspective and the policies she was going to bring forward to the people that she was speaking with. And at the end of the day, that felt so much better to her and so much in alignment with what she was trying to do that it didn't feel like bragging. And that is a great way to help exert your influence and to help people understand why you're doing what you're doing and how it's going to matter to them.
So, Melissa, if somebody does master becoming a confident communicator, how can that change their job, their relationships, their influence in their community? What is the value of being a confident communicator, in your opinion?
If you're a confident communicator, it doesn't just change outcomes, it changes your identity. You're going to stop replaying conversations as you lay awake at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're going to stop waiting for permission. You're going to start trusting your thinking in real time. And once that identity shifts, then those opportunities are going to follow naturally. And you're going to see that people are going to look at you differently when you walk into rooms. People are going to start offering you opportunities that maybe you only dreamed of because how they perceive you will change.
I've seen that happen. I have a friend who walks into the room and she's almost a magnet of people who want to talk to her and just be in her presence because she's really used her communication style to build strong relationships over so many different platforms. It's amazing. What happens when somebody finally believes that their voice matters?
Well, the biggest change isn't that you're speaking louder. It's that reduced hesitation. It's not that you're second guessing yourself anymore. You're going to take those conversational risks. You're going to engage more deeply and stop apologizing for taking up space. So that internal shift, that is just so freeing, and having a framework often helps, right? And so instead of mentally thinking through all the situations that you might encounter of do I speak, do I not speak, you have a framework that's going to help make that mental load easier. And so it removes that struggle of do I say something, do I not? And it helps with how do I enter that conversation. And so, what does that framework look like? A simple one that I like to teach clients is notice, name, offer. So, notice something in the conversation, name what you're observing, thinking, or wondering, and then offer your perspective, what that question might be or that idea. So, that structure then makes it feel less like an interruption and more like a contribution. And so if you use that consistently, then it starts to feel more natural. So what does this look like in an example? You might say, I'm noticing we keep coming back to this timeline concern. I'm wondering if we might explore a phased approach. So that then is confident without being aggressive. So if you notice, name, and then offer, that's a great way to help you enter the conversation in a quick and concise fashion.
Right. And it's very natural too, right? Because your contribution stemmed directly from something that was just somebody else spoke about. And it
Hmm.
gives you a chance to then give your opinion on the situation. I like that framework very much. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is super exciting because you've been working very, very hard for quite some time to create a brand new app. The app is called Confidence Spark. And tell us, Melissa, what inspired you to create this new app called Confidence Spark?
Yes. So it is Confidence Spark, SPARK. And I originally created it as I work with clients who sometimes don't feel confident about whatever we're working together on, whether that is creating a speech or entering the political arena or whatever that might be. And so we'll work together on that high stakes event or that next big event for right before whatever they have coming up, I like to send them a little text of encouragement. And one day before I sent one of those texts, I thought, well, I can't text the whole world. And then I thought, but what if I could? And so this app is my answer to that. And so, like we talked about earlier, people think that confidence is a feeling, but it actually is a rep, something that you can practice and something that can help you feel more confident if, like an exercise, do it more often. And so I would hear from clients, I wish I had this before my big moment. And so I've designed it to be kind of like a game time locker room coach before the big day. And so there's a series of situations like presentation or an interview or just a general confidence category where you can go in and it's science backed and it helps you with a mental reset. There's things you can do with your body and breathing and helps you stop the mental spiral and mentally warm up like Peloton for your mind.
It's amazing. Melissa has kindly allowed me to enter into the beta group. You have to check it out. It's so great. It's for everyone. Honestly, it can be used for everyone, not just because you're going in to do a speech necessarily. It could be used, as you mentioned, for so many areas of our lives where we just feel like we need that little mini reset to tune back into ourselves instead of letting the noise and maybe the pressure of the moment consume us. I am so excited for people to check it out. So, can you tell us a little bit about how the app helps us to build our confidence in some small, kind of progressive ways?
So we know that research shows that we aren't actually having a confidence problem. It's actually a nervous system problem that we need to reset. And so your brain isn't asking, am I prepared? It's asking, am I safe enough to be seen right now? And so when that visibility increases, whether you're in a meeting or a presentation or even having a conversation where you really care about what that outcome is, that activation naturally rises. And so that presence of nerves then doesn't mean that confidence is missing. It means that that moment is meaningful. And so there's micro evidence that we have short practices contained in the app with emotional regulation and help us with identity reinforcement and help us feel that repeated courage because we know that confidence compounds through small experiences of speaking. And if we can have that mental reset and mental reframe and stop the mental spiral that happens when we sometimes embark on things that we care deeply about that can help us reset and reframe. And so at the end of the day, it's kind of like having a confidence coach in your pocket that is on demand and you can access it anytime, day or night.
I said earlier in the interview that I needed a mini Melissa on my shoulder, and you have actually created that. So exciting. And you can hear Melissa's voice on the app as she talks you through some of the exercises. Some of it has some music to it. There's some actual action items that you can do with your body to center yourself and bring yourself back to a more calm state. It's it's so exciting. For somebody who's listening, who avoids speaking because they're terrified of it, what is one mind shift or one step that you can kind of leave us with today?
So I would encourage you to stop waiting to feel ready and start speaking before certainty arrives. So confidence is not the prerequisite, it's the result. So I would encourage you to play a mini detective and look for ways where you can speak in situations where you might not. So maybe you're going to speak in a meeting where you normally would sit quiet, or maybe you're going to enter a conversation at the dinner table where you normally would be happy to have the family just chatter amongst themselves. As we talked about earlier, those small micro reps help build confidence. And if you file those either mentally or even in a notes app on your phone of proof that I did something that was hard, that is how you start focusing on I can do hard things and I survived through them. And by building those reps up, that's how you start to build that confidence muscle.
My big takeaway from what you just said there is don't wait. Just start doing it. It is not true that you have to wait to be more confident. Just go out and start doing it. Start doing the reps and you'll get better with it over time. I invite you now to share with the audience where they might connect with you, where they are going to find you, your socials, your website.
Well, you can download the app Confidence Spark at your Play Store or at the Apple Store, either one. You can find more information about it at confidencespark.com. And I'm on Instagram at Confidence Spark and also on Taking Your Stage. That's the other name of my company. And LinkedIn under Melissa Entzminger. So I would love to connect with all of you and hear your stories about how you're using Confidence Spark and how you're building that confidence muscle.
Wonderful. If you have any exciting speeches coming up or big meetings or really anything in your life where you feel like you could use some confidence with your communication style, Melissa is definitely an outstanding resource that you can reach out to. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Melissa. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
For our listeners who tuned in today, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Redesigning Health and Home podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, we would love for you to like, share, and follow along so you can catch us on all future episodes. You can find me, Meg, at Fit, Fed, Feeling Good on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
And you can find me, Carrie, on my website at homestylewithcarrie.com and on Instagram and Facebook at Homestyle with Carrie. That's Kerri. And you can find both of us at Redesigning Health and Home on Instagram and Facebook. So join us next time for more inspiration on creating a home and a lifestyle that truly supports your best health.